On today's episode of Watch Chair Go, we are here with my Jag F-Type. In the last episode, we got a ton done towards getting this engine out, and today we're gonna try to get the Supercharger out. What is going on, guys? I am Watch Chair Go, and like I said, I'm here with my 2014 Jag F-Type S that I bought cheap. And we found out it has a bad head gasket at minimum. So today we're going to try to get the Supercharger off because it's kind of the next thing that's in the way as far as getting the engine out of the car. So that's our goal, is to get the engine out so we can get it on a stand and start inspecting it, figuring out just how bad it is. But today I need to get the Supercharger out of here because I need a place to lift the engine. I don't want to lift on it. It is mounted on some pretty small bolts from what I can see, and I'd like to have the intake exposed so that I could just shoot some fresh bolts into the engine there and hook onto them with a chain and yank it right out the top. So I don't know what all this entails. I don't even know what bolts hold the thing onto the engine. I can see some of them are exposed, and I think the main thing we have to do today is get all the wiring off the back side of it. In the last episode I unhooked most of the electrical connectors, everything I could, so we're gonna get right back on that. We got to get the Supercharger drive belt off. That thing is massive right there. It's like an 8-rib, pretty cool. And hopefully after that, we just have to figure out what bolts actually hold the thing on the engine and get it out of there. Shouldn't be terrible, but then again, I have no idea because we're doing this without a manual, as we always are. Let's jump right in here and get to it. We got the Supercharger lid off, and you can see the heat exchangers there sitting there leaking out all of their coolant. I thought I had it all drained down. I dumped it all in the pan and it just keeps coming out. So now we've got puddles on the floor. We also have one of the high pressure fuel lines off. I do now know the high pressure fuel pumps are down there on the pan, which was interesting before. I didn't think they actually were. They look like oil pumps or something like that, but they are high pressure fuel pumps. Now we can see into the intake a little bit here. There's the intake, and here is the Supercharger itself. It's a giant package. You can see that roots blower doing its magic right there, a little spin. And this is that rattle and noise everyone's hearing. It's the Supercharger coupler. Everyone mentioned it. On startup, they do that. On some cars, there's a clutch in there too. I don't know if there is on here, but there is some kind of coupler that's probably a little bit worn and causing all that wonderful noise. Not timing chain rattle, it is the Supercharger coupler rattle. So we'll see, maybe we can get that fixed while we're tearing this apart. And I don't know what I'm taking off next. I'm not quite sure if you pull these bolts and then this comes out, or really what comes out next. So I'm just gonna keep looking around until I find it. And of course the key to this, just like the R8, when you don't have a book and you're just getting it done, is lots of Ziploc bags. And some people don't want to throw away a bunch of Ziploc bags, so you can use like plastic multi-compartment trays from Harbor Freight or something like that. It's also a really good option. Just put tape on every one of them. But you know what, by the time you put tape on them, it's about the same as spending like whatever a box of these costs, like $2 or something like that. So it's a lot cheaper to just use a lot of plastic bags, I think, but they're not reusable. Obviously all of these bolts right here are the lid, so I'll bag them and tag them. And these will be Supercharged to intake, same drill. And I'll make a bag for basically every single thing on this car, so I don't need a book or anything like that. Torque specs should be readily available when it goes back together if you're worried about that. So you got the lid off your Supercharger, you got all the bolts out, you put all the bolts back in that you could, like the ones from the coolant pipe and stuff. I put all those back in their holes. And then you're trying to figure out why your Supercharger won't move. So I was also trying to figure out why my Supercharger won't move. So I Googled it and I found out many other people have been having this problem too. And what they've been doing is buying the engine support bar that I have over there in the corner that I could not be bothered to use because honestly it weighs too much to bring over here. They went and bought this to pull the Supercharger, an engine support bar that can lift a full engine. it's much simpler than that. Get out your biggest pry bar. For me, it's this one. Some of you guys might have that Snap-on or Mac that's like this big. And carefully, just note, this is all cast aluminum. It can break. Carefully, find something to pry on. I use like this chassis support bar. You can see I put a little tiny deformation in it right there. And I had all my weight on this, just rocking up and down, and just slowly, slowly, slowly. And then I came over here to this bar, got under this back tab, and then worked it and worked it and worked it and worked it. Walked around the engine, over to here. Same drill again. I already have this bar off, so I just use the bolt. It's screwed back into position, so I got plenty of leverage there that I can trust. And then rock and rock and rock. And then the same drill on the back, right here to right here, rock and rock and rock and rock. And you can see the supercharger is now free. Obviously, I wasn't really going for how-to on this. The answer is just take out all the bolts, pull the lid off, separate that, drain it down, pull the fuel line off, and pull all the bolts out of here. You don't need to pull the ones that go from the intake like chamber here into the supercharger itself. Leave those alone. The air, obviously, it's pretty cool. It comes in here through the throttle body, obviously, and then it's compressed in the supercharger, and the boost pressure air comes up through here. And this is like its internal wastegate that probably vents the atmosphere somewhere. I don't know where. It may recirc. Oh, it recircs. If this is open, you have no boost. It just dumps all the boost back into the supercharger, so it's recirculating internally, kind of cool. And then once this closes, it pushes all the air through the heat exchangers into the intake. So that's how the supercharger works, very simple. I think it's an Eaton because people talk about changing the oil in it and using the AC Delco oil. And typically it makes all the Roots blowers, for the most part, all the OEM ones, and they also love that AC Delco supercharger oil. Also, if you want to change the supercharger oil, you got to take the thing off. So it's a huge job. At least GM's nice enough to give us like a drain. On this, the drain's on the bottom, so it has to come all the way out if you need to change that oil. Don't worry, it's a pretty nonsense service. You can change it if you're into that sort of thing, but it lasts 100,000 miles. Also, that's the worst smelling oil on the planet. You think diff oil's bad, supercharger oil? It's gross. All right, so I've got it off. I got to pull 2 more Torx bolts here. They go from this line off the back of it, and then I'll be ready to lift this thing out. So let's finish this thing up. Can't wait to see what it looks like with this off of here. It looks like a really weird engine. It looks like a V8 with 2 cylinders cut off. I think we finally have everything unhooked. There's one hose underneath. Make sure you get it. It's a rubber hose that starts right here at the coolant reservoir, goes underneath the supercharger, has a bunch of clips under the supercharger, and goes all the way to the back and ends up being this hose right here. So you'll have to figure that out on your own. I know it's tough to visualize it, but that hose has to be off. So here we go. Oh, come on. The dowels that the supercharger sits in corrode together, so that's what we're fighting now. It's coming off, slowly but surely. I think you can see I got it loose, so now it should just come straight up. What a lot of work. Come on. Yep, some random hose. Ah, there it is. We got it. Coolant dumping out. Come on, dump on the floor. It took a solid hour and a half, but the supercharger is finally off. Well, the supercharger casting is actually stamped with Jaguar Land Rover. So, I mean, that's interesting, but it sure looks like an Eaton. I'm sure it's an Eaton. I mean, Ford built the engine, right? And they stamped their name on half the parts and Ford's name's on half the parts. So you guys, you probably know it's an Eaton M112, 116, something like that. I'm not exactly sure what the size is, but that's just kind of what it looks like sitting on the ground right there. Also, this looks like supercharger oil fill. I didn't see the drain anywhere, but hey, once it's off, you could use that port for both. You know, just dump it upside down with that fill port out and then flip it the other way and fill it right back up. So that would work. There's your snout, the actual spinny whoosh that makes your engine go fast, and the gearbox looks like it's in the back right there. So that's off, and we can finally see inside the valley. More heat exchangers down in there. That brand new water pump looks nice. Lots of garbage in this thing. Rusty bolts from being close to the East Coast. And you can also see that they did sub-harness the knock sensors and whatever that thing in the back is. I have no idea. There's just another sensor on a big plastic box back there. But this is the sub-harness that is knock sensors and that sensor. So you could probably leave that together if you're just pulling the harness or pulling the engine and leaving the harness in the car. I'll end up pulling all of it, but hey, it's already disconnected. So 2 knock sensors in the valley. I think the V8 gets 4. Looks pretty cool though. This is turning into another one of those long R8 level tasks just because there's so many little things I have to deal with and so many parts I have to keep track of. Also, before I get too far, these bolts will either go in the bag or go back in. Those are this little plastic line that also goes into that box. I don't know what that little box is. It looks like all of the vacuum meets in there, but it also has boost pressure applied directly to it, so it's really interesting. It's probably some kind of sensor box where it aggregates all the airflows and kind of figures out what's going on. I don't know for sure, but I think this is the map sensor right there. That little guy sticking out, and it's well instrumented, like I said. It's a cool engine. If you look right here on the bottom of the supercharger, you can see those dowels that get literally rusted into place. So that's what you're fighting when it won't come out of your car. So just keep working on it slowly. Turns out this big air heater is an Eaton TVS 1320. They make that blower for the Chevy LSJ. It goes on the LSA. It goes on the Jags, the Audis. It's obviously a very common supercharger, and that one does have a rubber isolator in the snout that is bad typically, and they said some of them might be installed backwards as well. So I will have a new solid coupler coming, and that should stop that noise completely. So one problem down. Now for the main problem here. I think that's it for today. I'm going to keep disconnecting some wires and get ready to start getting the torque converter unbolted tomorrow and try to get this engine out of here tomorrow. So who knows? There's a lot of work to do, but there's a chance we might be able to pull this thing out of here tomorrow. Hopefully you got to see some cool things today, maybe learn something about OEM superchargers. And that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to head on over to shop.watchjaguar.com for cool shirts, not like this. And please like, share, subscribe, do whatever you want to do. And I will talk to you next time. Even this lid's really cool. You can see all the air gets pushed through the top of the lid right here, and then goes over to each side, and then comes through these heat exchangers. Then each heat exchanger has its own coolant in and out, which I think that's a little obnoxious. I wish it was piped through the thing, but hey, nothing they can really do about that, I guess. But 4 water connections to the lid of the supercharger, oh. If you look down in there, you can finally see the valves, and they look to be in excellent condition. All of them, even this cylinder, which was the wet one. A lot of liquid in there, but the valves look excellent. This one's got some carbon in it. A little more carbon than the rest. Awesome news. There's always been this one part of my shop that just drives me nuts, because the entire shop is liner paneled except for this one corner. Like, I don't get it. I don't get why they left that out. Maybe they were gonna put a walk door in there and never got to it or something like that. But today we're gonna try to fix some of that. So the other problem is, because it never had liner panel, it has no base. So we got to get some base. Let's go move some of this stuff out of our way here and figure out exactly what we need to do. It looks like our piece of base is going to start right there on the red iron, and it needs to be about 45 3/4 inches long. Luckily I've got some base, so let's go cut some up. A couple of seconds later, and this thing is press fit, and I pre-drilled all the holes for the tap cons, and then I found out I don't have any tap cons. So I have a large collection of them at home, so I will grab some, shoot them in tomorrow, and stick 2 pieces up here, and it's done. This corner will no longer look horrific. It'll look nice and crispy like this whole section here does. So I'm excited about that. That was a lot of progress really fast. I guess we should check the fastener aisle here. Make sure there's no tap cons, but honestly, every bit of this is bolts for cars. So I don't see any tap cons. Back to work on the cars.